there are two issues that frame this, that are in the news right now, that I think are really important. Number one, the Defense Department has, this from USA Today, the Defense Department has failed to provide adequate oversight over tens of billions of dollars in contracts. Now, consider, if you had a business, if you ran a business and you got a $1 billion contract and you skimmed a couple of $1 million off the top and managed to, just pay yourself an obscene salary or whatever, I mean, some legal way, unethical, but legal way of stashing that money in your pocket, this is what's going on. And, one example of wasted money cited by the commission involved in construction of a $30 million dining facility at a U.S. base in Iraq, scheduled to be completed on December 25th. The decision it was based on, to build it was based on bad planning, botched paperwork, yet the project went along and the company got the money, on it goes. KBR, the primary log cap contractor in Iraq, has been paid $32 billion since 2001. Keep in mind, Halliburton was on the edge of bankruptcy the year of the 2000 election. Halliburton was on the edge of bankruptcy, and now huge. I mean, they weren't literally about to go bankrupt, but they were not doing well. This was a company that was not doing well. To say they were on the edge of bankruptcy is an exaggeration. They were just not incredibly profitable. Now they're mind-bogglingly profitable, and they're no longer even a U.S. company. So the commission says billions of dollars. So number one, there's that. And number two, you've got the entire world, and Joe Stiglitz wrote a great piece about this for Vanity Fair, for the July issue of Vanity Fair, about the entire world is watching the United States, and they're watching us go down the tubes. They're watching our economic system melt down. They're watching our political system melt down. They're looking at American democracy, and the 80% of the world who lives on less than $5 a day, the developing world, the third world, the 80% of the world, they're trying to figure out what form of government do they want to have. And the danger is that they will either choose some variation on fascism, kleptocracy, kingdom, whatever, as has happened in some countries around the world, on the one hand, or they will choose, that would be on the far right, or they will choose something on the extreme left, some variation on communism, which doesn't work in a community larger than a kibbutz or a tribe. And so this is the weird irony, is that politically and economically, historically, the most successful systems have been those that combine a free enterprise system, a market economy, with equally powerful, strong government regulation. And that's the really critical thing, the equally powerful part, that the strong government regulation is capable of restraining the excesses of free market capitalism. It's much like in your body. We've got all these internal regulatory systems so that one organ doesn't take over the entire body, or one cell doesn't grow too fast and thus become what's called cancer. Free enterprise and market capitalism have the very real potential to become cancers within the body politic in the United States. They absolutely have the ability to do that. And on the other hand, they also can provide enormous economic growth, and they can build and perhaps even more important than growth, innovation. Solar cells and wind turbines and new energy sources that don't have anything to do with carbon, and we can save the world, and et cetera, et cetera. All of that can come out of a free enterprise system, but not laissez-faire capitalism, not unregulated capitalism. So it has to be that balanced system. And countries all over the world are looking at us and saying, boy, maybe America isn't the role model that we want to have. A, we need to fix this. And B, we need to understand how it came about. I want to share with you what Lewis Powell did in 1971, right after the break. I was interviewed on Russian television this morning, and hopefully by the end of the day we'll have a link up, maybe tomorrow. I don't know how long it takes them to get things on the web, or even if they're going to. I'm assuming that they will. And their question was why it was about this Congressional Oversight Committee looking at the Defense Department and the waste there, and why is this happening? Why did this come about? How is this happening? How is it that this is going on? And who's at fault? And I explained to them that this is something that's been going on with the Pentagon since the Vietnam War, that back during World War II, Harry Truman as a senator, had a commission that was investigating war profiteers, and they were putting people in jail and putting companies out of business. But since Vietnam, it's just been, free, wide open, and particularly over the last 2 or 3 decades. And then the person who was interviewing me, she said, why? Who's responsible for this? Is this the president's fault, or is this Congress's fault? And I said, actually, it's the Supreme Court's fault. The Supreme Court, famously in 2 decisions in particular, Buckley versus Vallejo and First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti, in those 2 decisions, basically said that corporations are persons. Persons have the rights to free speech because a corporation doesn't have a mouth. How can it speak? It speaks with money. And those 2 decisions in the 70s and 80s, those, along with a few others, brought us to this point. But here's the piece that many people don't know about. Lewis Powell, in 1971, was a corporate lawyer. He was on the board of directors of 11 different corporations. He was a very well-connected, very wealthy, very conservative, very right-wing guy. A year later, well, actually that year, August 23rd, August, September, October. In October, he was nominated by Richard Nixon to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. And he, by the way, wrote the majority opinion in the First National Bank versus Bellotti case that I pointed out as one of the cases that says corporations have the right to involve themselves in ballot initiatives. Okay. So Lewis Powell in 1971 wrote this famous memo. It's sometimes referred to as the Powell Manifesto. If you just Google Powell memo, you'll find it all over the web. This is no secret that I'm sharing with you. But most people don't know about it. And in this memo, he lays it right out. And I'm just going to share some of his language with you, because this is shocking. He says, no thoughtful person can question that the American economic system is under broad attack. He wrote this letter, by the way, to the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And thus they're, well, anyhow, he says, this varies in scope, intensity, and the techniques employed, the level of visibility. He talks about how there have always been people opposed to the so-called American system. He's, communist. He says the most sources of the attack. The most disquieting voices joined the chorus of criticism come from perfectly respectable elements of society, from the college campus, the pulpit, the media, the intellectual and literary journals, the arts and sciences, and from politicians. And then he lays out in this memo how he thinks conservatives should take control of every single one of those. He points out, he said, one of the bewildering paradoxes of our time is the extent to which the enterprise system tolerates, if not participates in, its own destruction. The campuses from which much of the criticism emanates are supported by tax funds generated largely from American business. Keep in mind, back then, American business actually paid taxes. And contributions from capital funds controlled or generated by American business. And I would add, rich people. He says most of the media, including the national TV systems, are owned and theoretically controlled by corporations which depend upon profits and the enterprise system to succeed. And then he goes on and he talks about how William Kunstler is advocating revolution and how dare he, and Ralph Nader. He says, perhaps the single most effective antagonist of American business is Ralph Nader, who thanks to the media has become a legend in his own time and an idol of millions of Americans. And then he takes on Nader. He says, a frontal assault is made on our government, our system of justice and free enterprise by Yale professor Charles Reich in his widely published book, The Greening of America. How dare he? Basically like that. So then his chapter, the apathy and default of business. He says, what has been the response of business to this massive onslaught against its fundamental economics, upon its philosophy, upon its right to continue to manage its own affairs, and indeed its own integrity? The painfully sad truth is that business, including its board of directors, have often responded at all by appeasement, ineptitude, and ignoring the problem. So what should be done? He says, what specifically should be done? The first essential is for businessmen to confront this problem as a primary responsibility of corporate management. And then he's got a chapter called The Campus. The assault on the enterprise system was not monitored a few months. He goes on about Marxist faculties, social science faculties. What can be done? He says, number one, a staff of scholars. The chamber should consider establishing a staff highly. See, this is the memo that led to the creation of the Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and a whole bunch of other things. Number two, staff of speakers. Number three, a speakers bureau. Number four, evaluation of textbooks. The staff of scholars should evaluate social science textbooks, especially in economics, political science, and sociology. This should be a continuing program. Well, I'll tell you, it is. He says, we have seen the civil rights movement insist on rewriting many of the textbooks in our universities. Likewise, organized labor wants their viewpoint told. Our other interested citizens groups have not hesitated to review, analyze, and criticize textbooks and teaching materials. And he goes on about how he should do the same. Equal time in campus, another chapter. Balancing of the faculties, another chapter. Taking over graduate schools of business, another chapter. Secondary education. Action programs tailored to high schools, part of his agenda. This is how they did it.